Hey guys, just a word of warning, I do have a little bit of a head cold. If I'm a little hard to understand today, I'm sorry. I am trying to be good about it, but Southern Hemisphere, winter, there's only so much I can do. So a while back in my first video, I said that I had Asperger Syndrome and that from time to time I would hopefully be able to talk about that. That has been something I've kind of shied away from since then, not for any other reason than I didn't really have anything to say and I didn't think it'd be particularly entertaining. However, there's been a few things on my mind for the last couple of weeks, and one of them has had to do with Asperger Syndrome, and I figured I might as well talk about it. One of the misconceptions people seem to have about autism is that people on the autistic spectrum don't really get metaphors, have to take everything literally. Sometimes this is taken seriously, other times it's just played for laughs, like in Guardians of the Galaxy. Nothing goes over my head. My reflexes are far too quick. I would catch it. Yes, there are definitely some people on the autistic spectrum who don't get metaphors. There's also some people on the autistic spectrum who can't speak at all. People with autistic conditions can be very, very different from each other. I can definitely say that there are people on the autistic spectrum who have no more trouble with metaphors than most people. The problem isn't that we have trouble with metaphors. The problem is that we may have a different understanding. See, the idea of a metaphor is that you are directly comparing one thing to another. You are saying it is the same. Now that works great if you're talking to someone who has the same sorts of ideas or knowledge about something that you do. But that's not always the case, and it's not just dependent on whether the person you're talking to is or isn't autistic. It depends on whether or not they understand it the same way you do. I know, as someone with Asperger Syndrome, that the way I think isn't the same way that everyone else around me thinks. Sometimes an analogy or a metaphor that somebody else is trying to make won't always work. And that works in reverse as well, because sometimes I'll try to say something or try to compare one thing to another and they just won't get it. Either they understand the things differently than I do, so it doesn't work for them, or they just don't know what I'm talking about. Now, there are people who see things a lot more literally than that, have more trouble understanding metaphors and symbolism and all that, because something is just what it is, and you're comparing it to something else that isn't exactly the same and it doesn't make sense. Sometimes there is an element of that in my understanding of things. Because I take something too literally, I'll misinterpret what someone else is trying to say. However, to contrast that, sometimes my mind kind of goes into overdrive and I'll start seeing metaphors everywhere. Someone might say something about whatever object is just laying on the table, and because I understand what they're saying a certain way, internally I'll just kind of flip out and start overanalyzing the crap out of it. Some random gesture which doesn't mean anything, which all of a sudden turns into some huge symbolic action inside my head. The problem for me almost always comes from not understanding what's going on inside someone else's head, not the language itself. Long story short, with my Asperger Syndrome, yes, it does sometimes make it harder to understand when someone is saying one thing but means something else. That said, metaphor and symbolism can also be very useful for me because it allows me to take the understanding of something I already have and apply that to something I don't know about. One of the quotes up there on my wall from Stephen Hawking even goes, "I have noticed that even people who believe everything is predestined and nothing that we do matters still look both ways before crossing the street." It's not a particularly strong example of a metaphor, but it is taking something on an everyday basis, just crossing the road, and it turns it into, an understanding of life itself. And that's really useful for someone like me because I don't always pick up something new right away. It usually helps if I can compare it to something I already know. You're gonna make me sound like a huge geek. When you think about it, everything in the universe is made from exactly the same stuff. So the idea that you could compare something directly with another on the level of physics and mathematics makes perfect sense. So I guess that's more the poetry of science. So yeah, I thought I would share my 2 cents worth on that, which is another metaphor. Yeah, I guess I'll do the set piece. When you receive 2 invitations at the same time, how do you decide which one to accept? I don't think I've ever received 2 invitations at the same time. I'm not sure I'm qualified to answer this question. If there is some serious reason why I need to be there, then you know, that's what I go with. If I receive 2 invitations from friends at the same time, which has probably only happened like once in my life, I tend to go with whichever one I got first. If I've already said yes to someone, then I can't, you know, I don't want to go back and say no. That's probably a really generic answer, but the truth is I don't have much to say. This seems like something where I actually probably need more help than anybody who might be watching this, so if you have any ideas about that, please, you know, let me know. So anyway, thanks again for watching, guys. I know this probably wasn't the most entertaining video to watch, but I do think that sometimes it's important to talk about this stuff, and it's kind of a part of the reason why I'm doing this in the first place. With any luck, at least one person watching this has learned something new today, so if that happens, then, you know, good job. Thanks again, and if you want to see more of my stuff, don't forget to subscribe and check out my other videos. And if you did like this one, or if you learned something, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up so that I know to keep making these sorts of videos in the future. And yeah, see you guys soon. Bye! One of the quotes on my wall up there from Stephen Hawking is that... That's not the quote. Is that offensive? I think it's offensive. There's people making noise in the background. This displeases me.